Welcome to another deep dive. Whether you're commuting, getting ready for the day, or just carving out a quiet moment for yourself, we really appreciate you being here with us.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. We have a pretty profoundly complex and heavy subject today.
We really do.
Yeah.
We are unpacking what is clinically and experientially known as the emergency stage of healing from childhood sexual abuse.
Right. And our foundation for this discussion today is a collection of really visceral, deeply documented survivor accounts, along with psychological texts that basically map out this agonizing phase of recovery.
Yeah, and we're looking at material that doesn't just chronicle the pain.
Yeah.
It meticulously details the actual mechanics of survival.
Which is so important. The material we're engaging with today demands a certain level of reverence, really. These source texts provide a raw, unfiltered look at a psychological terrain that is mostly hidden from public view.
Completely hidden.
Right. The emergency stage isn't just a period of reflection. It's not just a difficult chapter of therapy. It is a profound crisis of the self. And what makes these accounts so vital is their dual nature. They articulate this seemingly inexpressible terror, but simultaneously, they offer a highly structured framework for navigating it. They literally give us the vocabulary for a profound psychological event.
And providing that vocabulary is our central mission today for you, the listener. We're going to serve as your guides through this terrain, really unpacking the physiological and psychological realities of this stage.
We'll look at why it occurs, how it completely destabilizes someone's worldview, and crucially, how survivors weather the storm.
Exactly. And to make sure you walk away with a really comprehensive understanding, we've actually distilled this massive amount of material into 10 core takeaways that define this stage.
Alongside 10 practical applications for actually navigating it, we'll weave those in as we go.
Right. So to immediately grasp just the all-encompassing nature of this crisis, there's a specific metaphor used early in the text.
Oh, the new word metaphor, yes.
Yeah. One survivor describes the onset of the emergency stage like this. She says, it's like learning a new word. Within days, you start seeing it in everything you read, and you never saw it before in your life.
It's such a simple comparison, but it captures the absolute ubiquity of the trauma once those psychological dams finally break.
Right, it captures a phenomenon we usually experience in a totally benign way.
Yeah.
Right, like the Bader-Meinhof phenomenon.
The frequency illusion.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You buy a red car, suddenly you see red cars everywhere.
Yeah.
But applying that cognitive mechanism to severe trauma, it alters the landscape entirely.
Because when the new word is the sudden, undeniable realization of childhood sexual abuse, it doesn't just passively appear in your day.
Yeah.
It dominates your entire visual and psychological field. The source text frames this not as a realization, but as a total, inescapable takeover.
A takeover. The language of invasion is so central to understanding this stage. The texts don't describe this phase as a passive act of remembering.
Not at all.
It's characterized as a hostile physical and psychological hijacking. And the very first survivor account we encounter illustrates this so viscerally.
The one about breathing.
Yes. She states, remembering the rape triggered the worst period of the whole healing process. I felt like I was going to die. I couldn't take a breath without thinking about incest. In fact, it was a struggle to breathe a lot of the time.
The memory is not a thought. It's literally an obstruction of the airway.
A literal struggle for oxygen. She describes spending consecutive days sitting on the kitchen floor, rocking and holding herself, totally unable to engage with the outside world.
And she articulates the nature of this invasion with chilling precision. She says, it felt like my body was inhabited by this thing that had happened in my childhood, that there wasn't a cell in my body that wasn't involved in it. The memories felt like they were invading me.
The same way my uncle had invaded my body.
Exactly. That final sentence is the master key to understanding the somatic reality of the emergency stage.
It draws an explicit, undeniable parallel between the original physical boundary violation of the abuse and the psychological boundary violation of the traumatic memory surfacing years later or decades later.
Right. The survivor isn't merely recalling a historical event from a safe distance. The trauma is stored at a cellular level. So when the emergency stage begins, the body experiences the recollection as an active, real-time occupation.
It's an involuntary crisis consuming the nervous system 24 hours a day. The symptomology outlined here reflects a body and mind under constant siege.
Uncontrollable flashbacks bleeding into waking life, unrelenting crying spells that drain all physical energy.
An absolute inability to maintain professional obligations.
And some find themselves in a state of hyperverbalization, just obsessively recounting the abuse to anyone who will listen.
Driven by this desperate need to externalize the internal pressure.
Yeah. And others experience such severe nocturnal terror that they are completely terrified to fall asleep. They know that closing their eyes just means surrendering to the nightmares.
We are observing the complete disruption of basic human functioning here. And the text provides a highly specific example that highlights this bizarre contrast between internal terror and external routine.
Yeah, donut shop.
The donut shop. There's an account of a survivor who lost all grip on her basic needs. She stopped eating, she stopped sleeping, yet somehow she managed to maintain her employment at Winchell's Donuts.
That specific detail, working at a donut shop while undergoing a total psychological collapse, it illustrates the desperate human instinct to hold on to just a single, threadbare tether of normalcy.
Even as the rest of reality is disintegrating around you.
Right, because outside of that donut shop, her reality was completely unmoored.
She details a paralyzing fear of staying in her own home alone. The text describes her leaving her house in the middle of the night to go hide behind a dumpster.
The level of raw, primal terror required to make the space behind a commercial dumpster in the dark feel safer than a locked bedroom. It's staggering.
It points to a complete breakdown of the brain's internal map of safety and danger.
Because the environment inside her home had become genuinely intolerable due to the sensory nature of this stage. She wasn't just anxious. She was experiencing vivid, intrusive visual fantasies and auditory hallucinations.
The text specifies she would hear the unmistakable sound of her father's zipper coming down. Followed by the click of the buckle, she would visualize blood.
These aren't abstract fears. The hallmark of the emergency stage is that the past is no longer history. It is a present tense event, unfolding in the living room, echoing in the hallway, and driving her out into the night.
And the physical deterioration that accompanies this psychological siege is profound. That same survivor notes that she hadn't bathed in a month because the shower itself had become a site of terror.
She contracted crabs, her basic hygiene, her fundamental self-care entirely obliterated.
The dissociation from her physical vessel was so severe that maintaining the body became impossible.
This specific account forces us to really reevaluate how trauma is conceptualized. The emergency stage is unequivocally an embodied crisis. The psychological pain overflows into profound physical and behavioral manifestations.
You aren't just fighting a memory. You're fighting a neurological system that is screaming that you are currently under lethal threat.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the physiological takeover is just one dimension. We also have to look at the total cognitive shattering that occurs.
Which brings us to Laura. Her account in the text is so vital because it maps the agonizing cognitive dissonance of this stage. Laura explains that she didn't have many concrete memories of her early life, but she had constructed what she called a golden narrative of her childhood.
A pristine picture she could proudly present to the world and to herself.
Right. And that golden childhood is a classic psychological defense mechanism.
What makes Laura's account compelling is her nuanced realization about the nature of those memories. She notes that the positive things she remembered likely did happen. Her entire life wasn't a conscious fabrication.
The crisis wasn't that the good memories were false. It was, as she states, I had somehow forgotten the fact that I had been sexually abused too.
The cognitive dissonance comes from attempting to merge two mutually exclusive realities.
Laura describes the exact moment of critical failure in her psyche. She says, breaking through my own denial and trying to fit the new reality into the shattered framework of the old was enough to catapult me into total crisis.
The friction of those two realities colliding, we really need to linger on that phrase, trying to fit the new reality into the shattered framework of the old.
It really encapsulates the chaotic essence of this state.
It does. The suffering is not merely the resurfacing of the event. It is the impossible, agonizing labor of taking a horrific truth and trying to force it into a mental architecture built entirely on assumptions of safety.
Assumptions of benevolent caregivers. A golden past.
Right. A framework built on safety simply cannot bear the weight of profound betrayal. Consequently, the entire framework collapses.
Laura articulates this collapse perfectly. I felt as if my whole foundation had been stolen from me. If this could have happened, then every assumption I had about life and my place in it was thrown up for question.
The cognitive load of that realization is immense. Every fundamental assumption is suddenly rendered invalid. Your identity, your origin, the safety of the world, the trustworthiness of your family.
And because the internal experience is so catastrophic, the vocabulary survivors use naturally gravitates toward the language of total devastation. The text explicitly points out that women in these early stages consistently rely on metaphors of natural disasters.
The imagery is uncompromising. Twisters, avalanches, erupting volcanoes.
Why do you think that specific imagery is so universal here?
Well, there's a specific psychological utility to those metaphors. Twisters and avalanches strip away human malice and intent. They represent sheer, uncontrollable forces of nature.
Right. They're sudden.
They cannot be reasoned with. You can't negotiate with a volcano or halt an avalanche with sheer willpower. Furthermore, when a natural disaster concludes, it has fundamentally altered the topography.
You can't reconstruct a mountain after an avalanche shears off its face.
Exactly. The landscape of the survivor's life is permanently, irreversibly changed.
Which brings us to what is perhaps the most profound analogy in the entire source text. The metaphor of the shattered floor. This it requires some careful examination. A survivor states, I felt like I was standing in a room looking at the floor. I was shattered all over it, and I had to go through and pick up the pieces and put them back together.
Look at each one and say, this is me, put it on, and say, this is where it goes, or nope, wrong place.
Then I'd have to find the place where it really fit. I was picking up pieces of my life and looking at them saying, do I want to keep this? Is it of any use to me anymore? When will the pain stop?
That is a masterclass in describing identity reconstruction. It speaks to the granular, exhausting labor of healing. The survivor is essentially a fragmented mosaic violently scattered across the floor.
Rebuilding isn't just restoring the old picture, because as Laura discovered, the old picture was flawed.
Right. The survivor has to pick up every single shard of their personality, every habit, every deeply held belief, every relational pattern,
Every reflex.
and interrogate it. Is this authentic to who I am, or is this a trauma response designed to keep me safe? Do I actually want to keep this piece?
Is it of any use to me anymore? That question is heartbreaking, but it introduces a crucial element of agency. The emergency stage strips away all control, but that meticulous process of examining the shards is the beginning of reclaiming autonomy.
Though performing that psychological inventory while suffocating under active trauma is Herculean, it perfectly aligns with a central directive from the text. The emergency stage is not something you choose, yet it must be ridden through to the other side.
It cannot be ignored or pushed away through a force of will.
Yeah.
You can't just decide to walk out of an avalanche while the snow is still falling. You just have to focus entirely on surviving the burial until the environment stabilizes.
Right. And to ground these theoretical concepts, the source material provides an extensive, highly detailed case study. The account of a survivor named Catherine. It offers this incredibly vivid window into the bizarre, contradictory day-to-day reality of living inside this crisis.
Catherine refers to this period as her year in the vacuum. And the catalyst for her entry into the emergency stage is really illuminating. She first confronted the reality of her abuse while attending an Al-Anon group. The text notes that it was within that specific environment that the emergency stage activated with full force.
The location of the trigger is vital for understanding nervous system regulation. Support group environments like Al-Anon are inherently structured around safety, vulnerability, and non-judgmental listening.
So the safety itself becomes the catalyst.
Exactly. Often, severe trauma will remain suppressed as long as an individual is operating in high-stress, survival-oriented environments. The psychological defenses cannot afford to drop. It's frequently only when the nervous system finally registers a genuinely safe environment that the heavy vault doors are allowed to open.
And once that vault opened, the feeling of safety evaporated instantly for Catherine. She details an uncontrollable sadness and a profound despair that finally had the space to manifest. She uses a striking visual to describe the onset.
The letters.
Yes. She says, it was like there were large 6-foot-high letters in my living room every day when I woke up. Incest.
The visual of the 6-foot-high letters perfectly encapsulates the obsessive, all-consuming nature of the takeover. The trauma becomes the singular focal point of existence, an elephant that occupies every square inch of the room.
What's particularly agonizing about Catherine's experience is how she projected this internal reality outward. She internalized the trauma to the point of assuming total public visibility.
She states, it was just so much in the forefront of my mind that I felt that everyone knew I was an incest victim. I thought I looked like one.
She lived under the crushing assumption that everyone could see the reason she was, in her own deeply self-critical words, such a creep. She was paralyzed by the fear of telling anyone due to the immense shame.
It highlights the unique isolation of this stage. The survivor feels like they're wearing a neon sign broadcasting their trauma, yet they are simultaneously terrified to speak a single word about it.
Hypervisible to themselves and totally silenced in the world. And that intense internal friction inevitably leads to profound social withdrawal, which the text documents meticulously.
Catherine notes she possessed absolutely zero energy to engage with other people or their daily problems. Her social and emotional reserves had been, as she describes it, drained dry.
The casual connections she previously maintained became impossible. The friends she used to call spontaneously just to go roller skating were left behind. The energetic cost of pretending to be normal had become an insurmountable burden.
If we refer back to the shattered floor metaphor, this withdrawal is the only logical outcome. If you are expending 100% of your cognitive bandwidth examining shards of identity and attempting to survive daily panic attacks.
There is literally no processing power left to care about a friend's minor inconvenience at work, or to go roller skating.
The performance of normalcy becomes utterly intolerable.
So in the absence of those casual connections, Catherine had to locate an entirely different tier of support. She needed people who could tolerate her presence regardless of her state. And she leaned heavily on one specific friend who had been physically beaten as a child.
The reliance on this specific friend underscores a critical theme in the text: the unparalleled value of shared trauma in the early stages of healing.
Why was this friend the only safe harbor? Catherine explained she could call this friend in the depths of despair, go to her house, eat, and simply stare at the television. Catherine notes, it was okay to go over there and feel shitty. She understood.
The text highlights the governing rule of that friendship. We only discussed it if I brought it up.
That is the gold standard for emergency stage support.
It really is. There is no demand for performance, no requirement to articulate the inexplicable, just the presence of another human being who inherently understands the terrain, offering a space where the survivor doesn't have to actively heal or explain, but can simply exist in their pain.
And finding safety wasn't limited to interpersonal relationships for Catherine. It required a radical alteration of her physical environment. Her own home, the place where the 6-foot letters loomed, no longer provided sanctuary.
She was compelled to seek safety externally. She spent massive amounts of time alone, outdoors, walking in the woods, running extensively.
And embarking on 20 or 30-mile bike rides. A 30-mile bike ride is a massive exertion of physical energy. It suggests a dual purpose, right?
Definitely. Partly a desperate attempt to physically outpace the intrusive memories, and partly a method of matching the intense, chaotic psychological energy with an equally intense physical output.
It's an intuitive somatic coping mechanism. When the cognitive mind is caught in a twister, engaging in rhythmic, bilateral physical activity forces the nervous system into a state of minor regulation.
It provides a temporary grounding mechanism. Plus, when a survivor feels entirely powerless against the psychological invasion, commanding the physical body to endure a 30-mile ride reclaims a vital sense of physical agency.
Despite these coping mechanisms, the necessity of engaging with the mundane world remains. Catherine discusses the surreal dissonance of attempting to execute familiar routines.
The bizarre necessity of proving to herself that she could perform basic tasks, going to the store, driving her car, while simultaneously existing as an incest victim in active crisis, she captures it perfectly. Outside, it all looked the same, but inside, it was just scrambled.
The internal monologue the text presents is fascinating. Now, I know I'm an incest victim, and yes, I still live here, and yes, my cats still like me.
You're standing in a grocery store checkout line, petting your cats, handling mundane transactions, while internally, your entire conceptual universe has collapsed into a singularity of trauma.
That profound disconnect between external presentation and internal catastrophe is what the text means by living in a vacuum for a year.
A total lack of atmosphere. A place where sound doesn't carry and isolation is absolute. When you're trapped in that environment for an extended period, relying on a tether to the outside world becomes a matter of survival.
For Catherine, that tether was highly specific and entirely literal. The text states that the singular thing that saved her when the isolation became absolute was having her therapist's phone number written everywhere.
Populating her entire environment with it. Taped to the bathroom mirror, written in her journal, scrawled on small pieces of paper and tucked into the book she was reading.
She embedded that sequence of numbers into her physical environment and her memory. But the true significance lies in how she utilized that number.
Frequently, she would call knowing she would only reach the answering machine. The act of leaving a message was the crucial mechanism. She needed to hear her own real, cracking, crying voice echoing into the machine.
Requesting that the therapist return the call. Why does that simple act of speaking into a recording device provide enough relief to stave off total collapse?
The answering machine served as tangible proof of object permanence in a reality that felt entirely fluid and hostile. Catherine explains that the machine let her know she retained the ability to reach out. It functioned as irrefutable evidence that a world existed outside of her pain and depression.
She articulates it beautifully in the text. There was actually somebody up on the ledge, and I could reach out to her. I knew she would call me eventually, and I could hold out till then.
The answering machine was a promise of a future event, the return phone call. It proved that she existed, that someone else existed, and it provided a concrete reason to endure the next hour.
Somebody up on the ledge. The imagery is stark. The survivor is in the abyss, and the therapist is the anchor point above. And the text offers a crucial arc to this narrative. After about a year of holding onto that ledge, a definitive shift occurred.
Catherine was eventually able to lift her head just enough to notice that the seasons had changed outside.
Noticing the changing of the seasons signifies the fracturing of the vacuum. It marks the termination of the acute 247 emergency stage. The obsessive rumination begins to recede, allowing the survivor to perceive the passage of time.
She realized she could resume a semblance of life, and occasionally she could even halt the intrusive thoughts. The text underscores that this realization brought a tremendous, profound relief.
Arriving at that relief, however, is a matter of grueling endurance. Fortunately, the source material pivots here into a highly pragmatic, structured guide on how to survive the crisis and actively ease its intensity.
The tactical maneuvers necessary for survival. It introduces a foundational concept that often feels violently counterintuitive. The text advises, if you find that the intensity of your feelings is unmanageable, try to pace the process. Full speed ahead is not always the most effective way to proceed.
That directive challenges our basic instincts. When a human being is in profound distress, the innate impulse is to accelerate toward a solution. Dig to the bottom of the trauma, excise it as quickly as possible. The text is demanding that the survivor actively fight that impulse and apply the brakes.
The reasoning is crucial. The process of healing must not become a source of re-traumatization. Pushing relentlessly into the trauma before the psyche has the structural integrity to process it is dangerous.
Often, a survivor must deliberately retreat from exploring the past and focus entirely on present-tense self-care, just to build a foundation capable of bearing the weight of the memories later.
The text utilizes a quote from the poet Dina Metzger to distill this philosophy. It reads, "We are in danger. There is time only to work slowly. There is no time not to love."
There is time only to work slowly. It highlights the paradox of trauma recovery. The psychological danger is so acute that rushing guarantees a catastrophic collapse.
And in this context, there is no time not to love translates to radical, uncompromising self-compassion, abandoning all expectations of rapid progress and committing entirely to the immediate safety of the nervous system.
This philosophy naturally leads us to the core promise we made at the beginning of our deep dive. The source material is dense with insights and directives, which we synthesized. We're going to explore 10 fundamental takeaways, the essential nature of the emergency stage, and 10 highly specific applications for surviving it.
Let's integrate these insights. A foundational takeaway from the text, number one, is understanding the involuntary nature of the crisis. It's not a conscious choice or a sign of weakness. It's an autonomous neurological response to suppressed trauma surfacing.
It cannot be bypassed, ignored, or subdued. Takeaway number 2 emphasizes that this endurance involves weathering an all-consuming takeover, not just intermittent thoughts, an obsessive state where you are thinking, eating, and dreaming about the abuse continuously.
The nervous system is hijacked, which leads to our third core takeaway, the shattering of previous realities. Confronting the abuse demolishes the entire narrative structure of the survivor's life.
Breaking through denial forces you to question every foundational assumption about your safety, family, and identity. The sheer violence of that cognitive demolition explains our fourth core insight, the frequent use of natural disaster metaphors.
Survivors universally rely on imagery of tornadoes and avalanches because they accurately convey the sudden, uncontrollable, and landscape-altering power of the stage.
Takeaway 5 is that facing that level of internal devastation fundamentally alters how a survivor can interact with the world, leading to a profound draining of social reserves. The text normalizes extreme withdrawal from casual acquaintances.
You literally lack the cognitive bandwidth for lighthearted social interactions. Consequently, takeaway 6. Normalcy becomes awkward. Executing daily tasks while internally existing in absolute terror creates a persistent, exhausting friction.
To survive that friction, survivors depend on takeaway 7, literal lifelines. Tangible physical anchors, like Catherine writing her therapist's phone number on mirrors, are vital tools for maintaining object permanence.
And the reliance on those tethers eventually leads to our 8th takeaway, a crucial beacon of hope. The crisis eventually shifts. The acute 2047 intensity is not permanent. By continuously putting one foot in front of the other, you will eventually reach a point where the obsession breaks.
But navigating toward that shift requires adhering to the 9th takeaway. Healing should not re-traumatize. The text issues a strong warning against forcefully excavating memories. Recognizing when to back away is a vital protective strategy.
Finally, takeaway 10 provides a realistic caveat. Crises can recur. The healing journey is not linear. Other healing crises may emerge as deeper layers are accessed. Crucially, the text frames these not as setbacks, but as profound opportunities for deep structural growth.
Understanding those 10 realities provides the framework. But the source text supplies the necessary toolkit with 10 essential applications, the self-care strategies required to protect yourself when the crisis hits.
The most prominent application aligning with Dina Metzger's poetry is number 1. Pace the process. Consciously and deliberately slow down your engagement with the trauma. If emotional flooding becomes unmanageable, pump the brakes and achieve a baseline of immediate safety.
Achieving that safety often requires specific external validation, leading to application 2. Find specific peer support. Seek connection specifically with other survivors. Individuals without shared traumatic experiences likely won't possess the capacity to listen as extensively as you need to talk.
Finding safety also extends to the physical environment. Application 3 is the necessity to create a safe physical space. Establish at least one fiercely protected location where you feel entirely secure and insulated from triggers.
Application 4 is policing your internal environment. Suspend self-criticism. Accept exactly where you are without judgment. Adding the weight of shame for not being further along only compounds the cognitive load.
Because that load is severe, the text insists on application 5. Postpone major life changes. Executive functioning is impaired. Decision-making is compromised. This is not the time to relocate or alter foundational relationships. Just sit tight.
There is one critical exception to sitting tight, which is application 6. Flee immediate abuse. This is non-negotiable. Psychological healing from historical trauma is physically impossible while the nervous system is under active present tense attack.
For those in safe environments, the focus shifts to energy conservation. Application 7. Drop non-essentials. Radically reduce responsibilities. Retain only activities that provide genuine pleasure or somatic nourishment.
As pressure mounts, the urge to escape becomes profound, leading to application 8. Limit chemical numbing. Repeatedly utilizing alcohol or drugs to suppress emotions only arrests the processing of the trauma, prolonging the emergency stage.
Navigating without numbing often requires relying on external resources. Application 9. Accept material help. Actively seek and accept financial assistance, community counseling, or tangible support from friends without shame.
Finally, to ensure help remains accessible during the darkest moments, application 10. Keep emergency contacts visible. Permanently embed the phone numbers of therapists or crisis lines into your physical environment as a constant visual reminder that isolation is not absolute.
Those insights and applications form a comprehensive, actionable blueprint. However, as we move into the final phase of our deep dive, we must confront a difficult reality regarding the duration of this crisis.
The material is remarkably candid about the variability of the emergency stage. It acknowledges that for some survivors, particularly those who have endured extreme, prolonged, or highly complex trauma, the emergency stage is not a relatively brief season.
Some individuals experience a prolonged crisis state with relentless intensity and only fleeting periods of respite, even when diligently applying self-care strategies.
The text is highly prescriptive here. Attempting to white-knuckle through a severe, unyielding emergency stage is deeply unsafe. It strongly recommends securing capable, professional counselors and consulting medical professionals regarding pharmacological support.
For debilitating symptoms like severe anxiety, profound depression, or chronic insomnia, medical reinforcements are vital tools, not signs of failure.
Yet, even when addressing the most prolonged, agonizing variations of the crisis, the source material absolutely refuses to surrender to despair. It concludes by offering a profound collection of direct quotes from survivors, detailing precisely what provided them with hope.
These closing accounts are moving and diverse. The first quote returns to the imagery of the ledge but transforms it. A survivor recounts.
I had this vision one day of me at the end of the tunnel, and I could look out and I could see the blue sky. I was standing on this very thin ledge, not holding on to anything, just balancing there. And I had my arms spread out and I was going to fly.
The ledge is no longer just a place to cling to. It becomes a launching pad for ultimate freedom.
The next perspective provides a radically different framework, coming from a survivor who previously lived as a nun in a contemplative monastic order.
She states, "Because I had lived that lifestyle, I knew that things took a long time. I was geared to an interior life. I knew that the process of becoming holy, of knowing God, was very slow. Day by day, I just knew I was growing closer to God. And I felt the same thing applied to dealing with the incest. I just trusted that something was happening, that there was a hidden growth going on." A hidden growth going on. That concept is revolutionary applied to trauma recovery. Taking the profound patience required for monastic spiritual development and applying it to the grueling, invisible work of psychological healing.
Asserting that even when there is zero external evidence of progress, when she is mobilized by panic or sitting silently on the floor, the deep tectonic plates of her psyche are actively shifting, trusting in a process of silent subterranean repair.
It completely redefines doing the work. We expect healing to be active, visible. Her framework suggests sometimes doing the work simply looks like surviving the winter. The concept of dormancy. A tree appearing completely dead above ground while expanding its root system extensively beneath the soil.
Other survivors found hope tethered to more immediate realities. One clung entirely to a mantra provided by her therapist. This is part of the change process. This is a recognized part of the change process.
The power of validation. When you feel like you are losing your mind, having an authority figure state that your experience is documented and predictable is a profound relief. Another survivor found her anchor through a friend named Patricia, who would actively talk her into wanting to live by pointing out the beauty in the world.
The survivor notes she believed Patricia simply because she knew Patricia cared for her, demonstrating the ability to borrow someone else's hope when you have none for yourself.
The text also highlights hope derived from witnessing the survival of others. One survivor drew immense strength from her sister, who had endured the absolute horrors of the Holocaust and still fought fiercely to live.
It's an amazing thing to see what people can live through and still want to live. Others found evidence of a future through literature or simply observing another survivor successfully maintaining a healthy relationship. Empirical proof that a life exists beyond the vacuum.
Proof that beauty, connection, and joy are not permanently eradicated by profound violation. The text touches on the restorative power of music as well. However, the final quote provided is perhaps the most striking in its raw power.
It strips away all metaphor. It simply reads, "My own inner strength gave me hope. I just won't quit, period."
I just won't quit, period. That is defiance weaponized as a life force, the absolute uncompromising refusal to allow the trauma or the abuser to author the final chapter of the survivor's life.
That profound defiance brings our exploration full circle. We began by examining the suffocating terror of the initial psychological invasion, the shattered cognitive foundations, the agonizing year navigating the vacuum.
We analyzed the granular strategies required for survival, pacing the process, relying on safe peers, lifelines written on mirrors, and we conclude with this unyielding, defiant return of hope.
The progression documented in these sources is a testament to the staggering resilience of the human psyche. As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to offer a final thought for you to carry with you, drawing directly upon the wisdom of the contemplative nun we discussed.
Reflect deeply on the concept of hidden growth. In our fast-paced world, we are culturally conditioned to demand that healing looks like immediate linear progress. We expect a checklist and a timeline. But if we view the agony of the emergency stage through the lens of that monastic patience, the paradigm shifts entirely.
Consider the possibility that the periods where you feel entirely shattered, where you are doing nothing but sitting on the floor, attempting to regulate your breathing, are not wasted time.
What if those periods of absolute darkness are actually the precise moments where the most profound, structural, and necessary growth is secretly taking root? What if the simple, grueling act of surviving the crisis is the growth?
What if surviving the crisis is the growth? That perspective has the power to fundamentally alter how we view a difficult day, an agonizing week, or a year spent in the vacuum. It frames survival not as stagnation, but as profound, invisible labor. Thank you for joining us on this intense, heavy, but ultimately vital deep dive into the realities of healing. Carry the insights and applications from these brave survivors with you. Practice radical patience with your own hidden growth, and remember to look for the seasons changing. We will meet you back here next time.